Okay, so this is just our cover slide here. And when I refer to file 251211, what I'm talking about is literally the proposed amendments to the existing street tree laws. That is the number of the file with those proposed amendments. Just a little bit about who I am. I am a member of the Urban Forestry Council, San Francisco Urban Forestry Council, although I want to make it clear that I'm speaking today just as a member of the public, not on behalf of the council. I'm also the co-founder of Mission Verde, which I'm happy to talk more about what that is exactly if anyone has questions about that. But essentially, it's important to know that if the proposed amendments were to go through as they currently exist, Mission Verde never would have existed. I'm also, I'd like to say, a recovering attorney. I became a member of the bar in 1999, and I'm still getting over it. But I have taken my experience and leveraged that into becoming a disability access consultant, which is what I do during the day. And I would say unofficially, the Lorax, that is not a title I gave to myself. That is what the Board of Appeals has come to think of me as. So I thought, why not? I'll put that in there as my last bullet point. And in this photo, I am next to a little cedar that I rescued from a farm where it was going to be torn out of the ground, and it is now living its best life in San Francisco. Okay, so a little bit of context about just really high level about San Francisco's urban tree canopy. We have the smallest tree canopy of any major city in the United States. Since 2017, San Francisco has net lost hundreds of street trees, and this does not include the hundreds of trees that have been removed in parks and on private property. In 2017, you may remember Proposition E, that's now called Street Tree SF, which dedicated, it was a $19 million set aside for tree maintenance and removal only. That does not apply to planting and watering new trees. There is no dedicated annual budget item for that specifically. We are currently failing to meet our tree planting goals that are set out in both the 2014 Urban Forest Plan and the 2021 Climate Action Plan. And it's just sort of the cherry on top of this sundae. The Streamlining Task Force has proposed to eliminate the Urban Forestry Council, which is currently the only entity dedicated to San Francisco's tree canopy support. Okay, so a little bit about the origin story for file 251211. Your guess is kind of as good as mine in a way. No one was really clamoring for this. There was not some loud outcry about, boy, we really need to do more streamlining to our city's street tree laws, but here we are. It is ostensibly part of the mayor's efforts to streamline permitting. It was co-sponsored by Supervisor Wong around 9 days after the mayor appointed him to the District 4 seat. And according to a representative of the San Francisco Sierra Club chapter, Supervisor Wong's staff seems to have very little knowledge about the tree ordinance that he introduced, which does not reflect well on Supervisor Wong. Okay. Sorry, I need to just move this little thumbnail video out of the way here. Okay, there we go. So a very brief overview about existing tree protections, and I'm sure our representative here from the Bureau of Urban Forestry, acting urban forester Susan Nawbary, can fill in some gaps if there are questions. But essentially, only street trees and significant trees require a permit to be removed. So street trees are the trees that are basically between the sidewalk and the street on that little strip of land there. And significant trees are trees that are a certain distance from the curb and that meet certain height, certain size requirements. So it's a limited number of trees, but those are the only two types of trees that require a permit to be removed. Trees on private property, other than significant trees, can be removed without a permit, and trees in city parks on federal properties such as the Presidio and on state properties such as Caltrans properties can also be removed without a permit. So what we're talking about here is a pretty limited amount of trees in the city of San Francisco. So here are I'm going to focus basically on two of the proposed amendments. The others are, I would say, sort of window dressing, but these are the two most substantive as I see them. Currently, street tree laws require, with the construction of a new building or the net addition of 500 square feet to an existing building, if you're engaged in making a new building or you're adding 500 square feet, to an existing building, then it triggers a requirement to plant one street tree for every 20 feet of frontage. So that's the current state of that particular provision. That is Public Works Code Article 16, Section 806, subsection D. Also, all tree removal permits are appealable. So that's for regular removals and removal of hazard trees, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in this presentation. Okay, so here we're going to do a little compare and contrast. So what we have now to what is proposed. So let's take that first substantive proposal there of where there is a tree planting requirement that is triggered by the construction of a new building or an addition of 500 square feet to an existing one. That would be changed from that to allowing the development projects to satisfy street tree planting requirements through payment of an in lieu fee, which is roughly $2,600, or provide alternative landscaping. So essentially it takes it from a required planting to an optional planting. Under the existing framework, if there are essentially irreconcilable infrastructural conflicts, the planting requirement can be waived. And in that case, there would be an in lieu fee paid for that waiver. And basically what does, it kind of flips that on its head. Instead of it being a requirement, it gives the developer the opportunity to choose for themselves. Do they want to plant a tree or do they want to pay $2,600 to get out of it? And potential impacts, I'm going to say asterisk here. This is my opinion based on my years of experience in doing work in this space. Essentially, incentivizing concrete over trees. It's a lot cheaper for a developer to simply pay the fee and walk away. Could result in a permanent loss of tree locations. So that is if a developer builds something in a way that prevents a tree from ever being planted in that location in the future. Arguably, the current in lieu fee is insufficient. It's $2,590. Why I say that this isn't sufficient is because, number one, I don't believe that it represents the actual cost. So everything from breaking up the concrete and hauling that concrete away, buying the tree, perhaps transporting the tree, paying the workers to put the tree in the ground, paying for 3 years of watering, and also potentially the maintenance fees involved in getting somebody out there to prune the tree, but also if the tree is vandalized or killed and needs to be replaced, not covering the cost of that replacement. Also, there is no current process in place where an in lieu fee comes in and a tree goes in the ground. It's perhaps that data exists somewhere, but as I understand it from the current superintendent of the Bureau of Urban Forestry, it's not a simple one-for-one. You can figure out, we got this fee, we planted this tree. And finally, this is being promoted as an equity amendment. So what I mean by that is the director of public works was quoted in an article as saying something, and I'm paraphrasing here, that this would give the city the flexibility to use in lieu fees to plant trees in neighborhoods that need more canopy. So that's either districts that have been historically redlined or areas such as the Civic Center and the South of Market, where there is anywhere between a 2 and maybe 6% tree canopy. The problem is that this equity is not actually part of the proposed statutory language. So it's a nice thing to say, but it's not actually in the proposed law. Okay, so then the next substantive amendment, again, remembering that currently all tree removal permits are appealable, all of them. And the proposal was to eliminate all appeals of tree removal permits when those permits are undertaken by city departments and commissions. So in other words, if the city seeks to remove a tree, that is not appealable. So going back to, for instance, I kind of previewed for you Mission Verde. Mission Verde was a program that grew out. Sorry? Okay. Mission Verde was a program that grew out of the appeals process that essentially formed a partnership between Public Works and volunteers in the mission to take on voluntarily the work of watering the trees. And by taking on the work voluntarily to water trees, we freed up money to plant 3 times as many trees along the Latin Cultural Corridor, that whole Calle 24 Cultural District. Now, that was done because it was essentially a settlement to an appeal of a permit the permit to remove all of the trees on 24th Street between Mission and Potrero. So if we did not have that appeals process, Mission Verde never would have existed. Okay, so the update, I have had a couple of conversations with essentially the mayor's liaison to planning and the superintendent to the Bureau of Urban Forestry to talk about these proposals. And since those conversations, the mayor's office has indicated that it will modify the proposed amendments to eliminate the right to appeal hazard trees only. So not all of them, only trees that are designated as hazard trees. But they also want to compress the appeal time for all tree removal permits, but only for tree removal permits, no other permit appeals, which is a little unclear. It's still not been articulated to me what is wrong with the timing of tree removals that is requires a more expedited process than any other type of appeal in the city. I also want to note that the file 251211 has not been updated to reflect this, what the mayor's office has said it will do. And I would love to be able to take them at their word for it. I did, however, somebody recently told me that a similar promise was made with regard to the new laws about parking on one's own sidewalk, that promises were made to advocates that then were not honored. So just a note that even though this is what I have been told, the file has not been updated, and it seems as if similar promises have been made in the past and not kept. So potential impacts here, obviously, removing the right to appeal essentially takes away any kind of oversight. And when you combine that also with eliminating the Urban Forestry Council, there's really no oversight to tree removal permits, again, for street trees, remembering that no other tree removal requires a permit at all. And then the hazard tree appeal issue, getting rid of a hazard tree appeal, my personal take, I have never filed an appeal of a hazard tree removal permit. That has not been my fight, but my concern is whether it's today, tomorrow, or 10 years in the future, there being some abuse of that eliminated appeal right by designating trees hazards that perhaps are not actually hazards. I did bring this up with the superintendent for the Bureau of Urban Forestry, and I said, look, I don't personally have a problem with getting rid of that appeal right for hazard tree permit removals. But I would like to see some guardrails so that it does not get abused in the future. I think many people on this call live with the institutional memory of the Nuru administration, and really wanting to make sure that there is not an abuse of that in the future. The superintendent politely declined to do that. So here's the upshot. Again, in my opinion, singling out tree removal permit appeals, perhaps altogether if they don't update the file, but at minimally for expediting, even though there are only about 1 to 2 such appeals every year. Again, creating an opportunity for the hazard tree designation to be abused in the future as an end run to avoid a tree removal permit appeal, and then giving developers an easy out on current tree planting requirements, which reduces street tree planting overall. So basically fewer trees, less funding, and less oversight. That is the end of my presentation. So I don't know, Deborah, I will hand it back to you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Josh, I had request. Would you be willing to share the slides you just showed us?
Okay. Absolutely.
Oh, good. If you can send them to me, we can post them on the website, and I can distribute to anyone who wants them.
Okay.
And you and anyone else doing a slide presentation, please share. Let me know if you're willing to share. And now, if you have any questions for Josh, please raise your hand. George Wooding, your hand is raised first, so you get the first question. Oh, you have to unmute yourself. I muted people.
Thank you, Deborah. Hi, Josh. Thank you for the great presentation. Very clear. You're in a good spot because Carla Short was in the exact same seat you're sitting in, and she ended up running the DPW. So So, so you're in a very good spot. So my first question is, where is she? I mean, I know her. She used to love the urban forest. And not mentioning her name was kind of startling in that she's not fighting a little bit more. This was her first love. Second thing, there's a set aside in the discretionary general fund for trees for $19 million a year. And what's happened is the city has not spent all the $19 million over the last decade. And what this has done, when you have set asides in the general fund, it means that nobody else can grab that money. It's stuck in the tree fund. So you're building up, you may have over $100 million in that one fund that nobody can reach or utilize. So I was curious. I know in lieu fees are important, but you're sitting on a vast amount of money and you're working with probably one of the strongest tree advocates in the city. So I was just curious, what what more end game can we have to help the trees in the appeals?
So working backwards on your questions, George, thank you for those questions. Regarding the set aside, again, legally, that is only allowed to be used for maintenance and removal. And I think that, we've got two representatives here from Public Works. They can probably speak more to utilization of that fund or underutilization or whatever it is that they, however that is being used. So I will defer to them on that. As far as Carla Short goes, I don't, I can't judge her. I don't know what her situation is, San Francisco politics are not a place that I envy. So, I would also defer that question to Chris Heredia, who is here as Public Works Public Information Officer.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Marie.
One of the things I'd like to point out is the hazard tree aspect. If this was happening right now, all the trees on 24th Street would have been taken out because every single one would have been a hazard tree. And I think that's the real danger of this is the city can come in and decide what's a hazard and what's not. Geez, it's raining. I think that alone is the reason we need to fight this, because otherwise we know the city lies and that's our only leg to stand on. Sorry, I think it's Haley. Thank you.
So for context, Marie is one of our steadfast Mission Verde volunteers. She has done her work. She has watered a lot of trees by hand, and I am so grateful every time I see her out on 24th Street, and to make sure to thank her for all of the unpaid hours that she put. And yes, it is hailing. Marie and I don't live that far apart, and it is hitting the back of my back windows. There is concern, and I think again, we've got Susan Nawbary here, who is our acting urban forester. I think she could shed a lot of light on the criteria around has the designation of a tree as a hazard. Um, I've known Susan since 2018, I think. I have a lot of trust in her judgment. My concern is really not about Susan. It's about the person who's after Susan or after that, or 10 years or 15 or 20 years from now, if that becomes, if designating a tree becomes an end run. And I know it is a very sensitive subject along 24th Street because we fought really hard to save over half of those trees that were originally designated to be removed, the majority of which are still standing. So I understand that it's a very sensitive issue, especially for neighborhoods that have faced large scale removals like that they don't want to be put in that position with no recourse.
Oh, and Judy, you're next. Judy Gorski, go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
first of all, some of my questions were answered by the conversation. So I also wanted to really thank Josh for that wonderful presentation and enlightening me on several things.
I'm going to answer a couple questions in chat. Wong was the only supervisor I invited. I emailed him twice. I personally talked to his aide twice last week and handed him a copy of the email. Andrew, his aide, told me he'd get back to me, and I haven't heard back from him yet. So I did contact Wong. And next question is Ariane.
I just a quick note on that, Judy, that I think, in addition to whatever else has been said about Supervisor Wong, I think that one of the things he does not have the sort of institutional knowledge, his history to understand is that the level of engagement with the public has been really fruitful with Public Works and with the Bureau of Urban Forestry. We have preserved hundreds of trees. We've created really innovative partnerships. I mean, it's not just about fighting the city. That's not how I see it. I see it as creating solutions and partnerships in ways that we can grow our canopy. How can we preserve and, protect and grow? So being able to file the appeals and having that forum of a third party, the Board of Appeals, saying, hey, can you guys figure out a solution here? I'm all about that, because I think there are so many ways that we can be solving the issues that we have right now as a city, trees being one of them. And the more you cut the public out of that, the less we're able to solve those problems.
I sure hope you get it in writing. It's very important, and I agree that your work has certainly moved that in the right direction if they would stand by it. And they won't stand by it unless it's in writing and they're under threat of being sued, in my opinion.
And it looks like there are no more questions. So please go to the link in chat and sign Josh's petition.
No, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I lowered my hand because you had called on me,
Oh,
but
okay.
you said that you would
Oh, yes. I'm
make
sorry.
some comments. Yeah, you called on me. So just a few comments. It's hard not to feel emotional about this topic, and I appreciate you, Josh. Yeah, I want to underscore what Judy just said about writing. We have no laudable newspaper in this town anymore. That means that we have no one monitoring. And when we did have the Chronicle, it's a pro-developer, pro-real estate, pro-investor newspaper. We're in a lot of trouble. None of the politicians are talking about climate disruption or the climate catastrophe. They're not doing anything to prepare for it. And when you talk about the upzoning laws, it's going to literally collapse the city's environmental structure. They're going to be pretty much selling off the commons, like along Fulton and other places, to big developers for pretty much apartments that will be slated for wealthy investors nationally and internationally. You can see where the city's going. And this is just one aspect of this. It feels like money is God in this city. And I really would encourage, those are, without a newspaper, without journalists, people don't know what's going on. And the public is pretty complacent. But if they don't know, they're not going to, it's already too late by the time something is cut down. I mean, I've often seen like Golden Gate Park or the PUC near Laguna Honda. I'm driving by where they're literally cutting down, 150-year-old healthy, beautiful eucalyptus trees with no public comment. They're clearing the cliffs. No one talks about the fact that these trees are holding the soil together, during these storm bombs, or that our city actually sued the EPA so that we wouldn't be held liable for upgrading our sewer system. Our city's on the wrong side of history. And we have to be willing to talk openly about this, that our city is being sold to the highest bidder, and our health, our safety, and the interlocking ecosystems that don't abide by city, state, national institutions, borders, laws are interlocking, and they're integrated in our fate, our future as humanity. We cannot assume that things are going to get better by themselves. And I guess what I would say is that I think, besides speaking up louder, is just to include, mention these things like the climate emergency, not global warming, because that's a euphemism, climate disruption, and the fact that trees, bring down temperature. They're our neighbors. They're part of our community. They're sequestering carbon dioxide for 50% to their weight. And there's our silent soldiers against the climate emergency. They fight for us every day of our lives. And they're undervalued because they don't have a voice. And so we have to find a way to bring back some newspapers into this town and also to stand up. People are getting more sensitized about the oppressed. The way they talk about trees is the way they talk about immigrants, that certain trees don't belong here, that they're dirty, that they produce without end, that they're invasive, even though humanity is endangering all life on this planet at 8 billion. So we want to really, I feel, intensify the language and bring in more elements, that this is not just a city decision. This affects all of us and our future. They're doing absolutely nothing.
You
And
brought up very important points, but the interest of time, is there a question? Because we have several more speakers.
yeah, what can we do about
Let's listen to all the speakers, not give up, but I'm going to go next to Fred.
Hi, I'm very grateful for this forum and especially as a lover of trees. I would like to find out tonight what does a hazardous tree mean? As I walk around the city, as the trees that have been planted over the decades mature, more and more trees are pushing up the sidewalk. And I'm wondering also whether this money that has been sequestered is available to make repairs that will allow those trees to remain. And that doesn't have to be answered now, but if it happened this evening, I'd be happy. Thank you.
Yeah, Fred, that's a great question. And I know that Susan can absolutely answer that.
Okay.
Well, let's go next to Susan.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Susan Nawbary, and I am the acting urban forester for the Bureau of Urban Forestry. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here and being advocates for the trees. It can feel very lonely sometimes when you're the one issuing a permit or telling someone they can't top a tree, and wondering, like, do people care about trees? And this entire Zoom call tells me that there are people that care about trees, and it makes us really happy to hear from people like you. It's our purpose. I do have a presentation to share, and then I'm going to answer some of the questions that I think were asked here. We are the Bureau of Urban Forestry. Our goal is to enhance San Francisco's green infrastructure. We do have a mission and a vision to enhance the city's green infrastructure by preserving and growing the trees and plants that make up our urban forest. But we also deal with infrastructure conflicts, and that's repairing tree-related sidewalk damage. And we also provide a tree emergency response. This morning, a tree fell across Potrero, and our arborists working very hard to make that tree safe. And that does take our bandwidth away from routine tree maintenance. So our arborists are our heroes. They keep the streets safe when trees fail. But trees are more than just beautiful additions to urban life. And as everyone pointed out in this call, they do provide enormous environmental and social benefits. Particularly in San Francisco, they provide enhanced mental health benefits in an urban setting. And that's extremely important to the overall viability of our city. So, like we said, vibrant, livable communities, safety and accessibility and climate resilience through tree, sidewalk, and landscape management. That's one of the benefits of our program. And trees provide mental and physical health benefits and improved air quality. And they do reduce the urban heat island effect. And they do promote biodiversity and wildlife habitat. And those of you in District 7 have probably seen quite a few coyotes and wildlife, and that's due to a lot of preservation across the state, really. But you'll see that they're spreading into our urban canopied areas. So we manage over 125,000 street trees. We provide 24/7 tree emergency response. We issue tree removal permits and review development plans. The city prunes 10,000 trees annually, so we are actually utilizing that street tree SF funding. Our inspectors perform 3,800 tree inspections per year, and that's just with a staff of 3 to 4 inspectors. We are meant to be staffed for 9, so if you are waiting a while for a response, it's because we're doing many things, including like the development permits, issuing tree planting permits, performing those tree inspections. We have tree planting partners. If some of you probably have heard of Friends of the Urban Forest, and they're planting 4,000 trees annually. Our landscape team waters those trees. We repair 25,000 square feet of sidewalk damage per year. And we maintain the medians, boulevards, and landscaping. And we operate a street tree nursery and a workforce development program. So it's a lot of tasks and operations in actually a relatively small bureau. We're one of the lowest staffed bureaus in the Department of Public Works. And I think that considering the number of resources we have, we try really hard to provide a level of service. I know some people they mentioned that, how do you get my sidewalk repaired? So we do have a strategy for repairing sidewalk, but it is focused in those really dense areas. So we have some guiding policies, and sorry about the format here. It's our ordinance, Article 16. We have an urban forest plan, and we do have a climate action plan, as Josh Klipp mentioned. We have an approved street tree list that guides our planting palette, and it's changing all the time. And we have a director's order on tree planting that is more expansive than the Public Works Code, and it guides tree planting based on size of sidewalk, overhead utility lines, microclimate. So we take all these things very seriously, and a lot of work goes into actually planning when a tree gets planted, how, and what species goes in, and the long-term maintenance. So Street Tree SF, as some of you have mentioned, it was approved by the voters in 2016 and launched in 2017. It is $20 million in dedicated tree funding, and the city is responsible for street tree related sidewalk repairs, pruning, and removal. This funding supports inspectors, arborists, cement masons, and gardeners, and actually many laborers and an apprentice program. So it was passed overwhelmingly with 79% of voters. So the funding supports the tree inspectors, as I mentioned. We assess the city's the tree health of the trees in the city. We identify planting sites and manage the city's tree database. We are all certified arborists, and we're all responsible for inspecting the trees. And we have certified arborists on staff and certified tree workers, and they're responsible for street tree pruning and removal. They work very hard. It's a very dangerous job, and they do it very safely and effectively. We have cement masons and they replace sidewalks and curbs damaged by tree roots. They're journey level masons. It's another job that takes extremely skilled talent to perform, and so it's not just simple laborers. So it's difficult to staff these highly labor intensive but technically challenging positions. So like I said, I think our staff, they do really well with the staffing resources they have, but they are journey level positions. It's not just go cut the tree and go crack the sidewalk and re-pour it. All these positions are certified, journey leveled, and highly professional. We have watering operations and maintenance equipment required for ongoing tree care. So we have watering trucks that drive around the city, and sourcing those it's very difficult, but we try our best. A water truck is like $100,000. So all those things have to go through the Civil Service Commission. So I just want to emphasize the pace of improvements can be very slow, but we try really hard to make modifications and to balance our challenges with the needs of the city. So we also manage tree pruning, removal, and sidewalk repair contracts. The inspection team does that, and as I mentioned before, above all the other inspection tasks, we're also managing contracts. So there's quite a bit. Speaking of our inspection team, we inspect over 3,800 street trees and tree-related sidewalk conditions annually. And again, that's with 3 or 4 staff members. We respond to over 4,100 email and 3-in-1 requests annually. We perform 1,500 plan reviews. Those are ADUs, 500 square foot additions, new buildings and garages. That's per year. And we strategize our tree planting and maintenance operations. We perform quality control on street tree and sidewalk maintenance contracts. And we manage the street tree inventory and data and maps. So it's a lot, but like we care a lot about the work, and we want to serve the residents like to the level that you all expect. But we understand that sometimes it can be difficult, like waiting for a response or service. But just to put into context, the sheer volume of requests we get and the number of people we have, we care deeply about the urban forest, and we care about doing things right. So sometimes we value like quality over quantity, and we may not be responding at the pace that is requested. So our goal moving forward is pruning every 5 years. We were hit with a global pandemic in 2020 that canceled all of our contracts and set all the contract administration back by 18 months. With that pandemic came the reduction of staff by about 30%, and we still have not regained that staffing. So we have been working on prioritizing tree maintenance by like what we consider trees that require the most maintenance. The worst first prioritization of sidewalk damage, that's highly traveled corridors with damage that's perpendicular to path of travel. And we do have a public street tree map that's available to residents, and we are working on a second version of that for our second street tree pruning cycle. And if you don't want our arborists to prune your tree, you can opt out, although I do recommend meeting with our arborists when you have a question about our trees, because sometimes it's a misunderstanding of what the pruning objectives are, and seeing past pruning practices from other property owners that seem to inform the decisions. And I do recommend like talking to us before you opt out. So we are expected to finish pruning 125,000 street trees by the end of this year. So while that was not as fast as we expected to prune the trees, we did prune 125,000 street trees since 2017, so in 9 years. So we did expect to move at a 5-year cycle, but we are using that street tree SF funding. And we did prune all those trees, and you can see that in our street tree map. Trees grow, and so when you see a tree that might be touching a building, that might have been pruned 7 years ago. So one thing that, we might discuss later is like what your main priorities are for your districts, and that might be different for everybody. But one thing residents should know is, yes, we have 3-in-1. We have a street tree map where you can check your maintenance cycles. We need people to help water trees very desperately. So if you want a tree in front of your house, talk to us. And if you can water a tree once per week for 3 years, like this gentleman here is doing in this photo, he's filling up the water bag completely, and he has to do that every week, sorry. So that's 152 times to establish a tree. So trees in California need a lot of water. It's much more labor intensive than planting a tree in the East Coast or the Southeast, where they have constant precipitation year round. And then lastly, and this group, is fond of trees, but don't top your tree. Unauthorized pruning can result in fines. Just talk to us. And sometimes people say, oh, the tree touching communication wire. Well, trees can touch most wires. I spent a lot of my career before working with the city of San Francisco inspecting trees for power lines. And you'd be surprised, they can touch low voltage power lines, they can touch service drops, they can touch communication lines. What they can't touch are the high voltage lines. And PG&E has a program to prune for high voltage lines. So next time you see a tree in a communication line, like, don't sweat it. It's fine. They're insulated. Unless you see the line actually bending, it's really not as concerning as you think. So that might help a lot with understanding, like, is the tree maintained? Does that tree actually need maintenance? So we do have, as I mentioned, we have some challenges. And we do have some goals too. We do want to address our sidewalk repair backlog that was mentioned earlier. We do want to plan for our next pruning cycle, and that is underway. We want to expand our staffing so that we can respond to your requests more quickly, and we want to expand our contracting capacity. One of the challenges with contract capacity is we can only issue a contract service order that is $900,000. Again, if we have $19 million a year to spend, if our service orders are held up in these contracting rules, that can reduce contracting capacity. So that's something to think about, is like some of the rules that designed to protect and create transparency can also hinder the speed of progress. So that, it's something to think about in balancing, like, are you getting service versus is the service I'm being provided, like, being reviewed with transparency. Our other goal is to grow the tree population to 155,000 trees by 2040. Tree planting is clearly a large concern with this group, so we'll address that further. We do want to plant 3,500 new trees in low canopied areas. That is referring to our Inflation Reduction Act grant. We used the previous administration's boundaries for that, and that was founded with very rigorous research especially from folks in the Pacific Southwest Research Station. I actually went to forestry school at UC Berkeley with many of them. They are highly reputable researchers, and there's a lot of data and resources and calculations that go into determining what an equity priority area is for tree planting. So our IRA grant is focused in planting in these low canopy areas. And generally, we want to increase the planting pace beyond 1,300 and 2,300 trees a year. So right now I have, this is all kind of new. We have a new superintendent, as many of you heard, and like, he has a lot of big plans, and it's why I'm now tasked with planning out the next 5 years of our street tree maintenance cycle, and that map should be coming out within the next 2 months. And we have a new planting strategy that should increase the pace of planting, and that includes planning out a calendar like 18 months prior and leveraging our inspection staff to review planting sites in the summer and plant in the winter. And that buys us a lot more time. And I know tree planting is a concern, and staffing is a concern with reviewing those. So that's something I want to touch on with the in lieu fees and the development in a moment. But we do have a lot of special projects for tree planting. We have our Neighborhood Beautification Day, Arbor Day. That's happening on March 14th. If you want to volunteer, please email volunteer@sfdpw.org. And then we apply for tree planting and watering grants year-round. So that's how we get a lot of our funding. Again, we have that $12 million Inflation Reduction Act grant that plants 3,500 trees. We have the Proposition L grant that is $1.1 million, and that is funded for 408 trees. And we have workforce development centered at the Street Tree Nursery. So we do have special projects, and we do have tree planting funding coming in through grants. And because those grants have very specific areas that are required to fulfill the grant, that's why sometimes someone asks for like a tree in Bernal Heights or a tree near Twin Peaks. And the grants we receive the funding is very specific and earmarked. So while people point to like the amount of funding and wealth that San Francisco has, as people mentioned earlier, we do have tree planting funding, but it's very, very specific and earmarked in these grants. We have a street tree nursery. You can learn about that later if you want to contact us and talk about that. I have a feeling you guys are here more to talk about tree planting and in lieu fees. So we have some contacts and resources. If you guys want to take a screenshot of this, our public information officer is Christopher Heredia at sfdpw.org. You can call 311. There's that volunteer email I mentioned earlier if you want to volunteer for Arbor Day, or if you have like an unaccepted right-of-way near your house and you want to turn it into a street park, you can contact volunteer at sfdpw.org. It's a great way to leverage city resources and involve your community at the same time. And then if you have any general tree questions, like is this tree concerning? Can I plant a tree? I have an ADU I'm waiting to get legalized. You can contact Urban Forestry at sfdpw.org. We also have our street tree map here. It's that URL that's bsm.sfdpw. So yeah, Christopher Heredia can like send out these resources too, so you guys have them. And you can always come by our website. And also we have a counter at 49 South Van Ness. That's our permit center. So that's the presentation. But one thing I wanted to mention is we have like that really small inspection staff. And I mentioned earlier that we probably spend 70% of our time reviewing those 1,500 development permits. And one thing that does is keeps us in the office and not in the field. We're not looking at service requests at the pace we want to look at. We're also not able to utilize the money in our adopted tree fund if we can't go look for planting sites. So one way to look at the reduction of planting from developers is that those funds would actually be utilized from the adopted tree when we go canvas sites. And so we have those neighborhood beautification days I mentioned. We have one in every single district. So if we had more bandwidth and staffing to go look for sites, we could actually tap into that adopted tree funding. Right now we're using mostly our grant funding because those have deadlines, but we have adopted tree funding that comes from development fees, and we do want to use them. And we just don't have the bandwidth to go look for sites. And one incredibly amazing thing Josh Klipp did for us was, he went to Board of Appeals and he helped get this $242,000 in lieu fee for the city. And that, because of that, we were able to issue a tree planting contract. But I will say that takes work. We have to go canvas 105 sites, and that's balancing all the other demands. So it is interesting to look at the juxtaposition of like, do we want developers to plant the trees for us? Or do we want to have our inspectors spend less time reviewing the permits and utilizing the fees by looking for planting sites? So I don't know how it's going to look in action because I don't have a crystal ball, but that is part of the rationale for that amendment change, and also to speed up, honestly, like to speed up the pace of these permits, because there have been times where it was pointed out for some affordable housing that we exceeded the state law requirements for reviewing these in a timely manner. And in order to stay compliant, we need to be able to review them faster. And by having the developer elect to pay the fee in the development in the planning phase, it skips urban forestry and it puts the money in the urban forestry account instead. So that's basically kind of what we're dealing with and how we're balancing that. So I totally understand why people are concerned that might result in fewer trees. But the flip side of that coin is that might result in more staff time to go actually look for planting sites. So that is one of our objectives this year, is to utilize that adopted tree fund and move it into tree planting contracts. And then one other thing that was mentioned is what is a hazard tree? And so all of our arborists and all of our inspectors are certified by the International Society of Arboriculture, and I'm a board certified master arborist, and all of our inspectors have our tree risk assessment qualification. And that's a qualification that's issued by the certifying body of the International Society of Arboriculture. And that is the standard for tree care globally. So anywhere you go, the ISA is the law for tree maintenance effectively. So like, what is a tree and a hazard? And a tree is considered hazardous when it has been assessed and found to be likely to fail or cause unacceptable degree of injury, damage, disruption. And that is that it poses a higher extreme risk. And most trees are not hazardous. Most trees are fine. We balance tree risk and benefits, and it helps to know that trees provide a wide variety of benefits to society. Trees are living organisms that naturally lose branches or fall, and the risk to human safety is extremely low. And tree owners have a legal duty of care, and the city of San Francisco and all of its residents are collectively the owners of these street trees. So I hope that kind of addresses some of the questions you guys have with like specifically the in lieu fees and hazard trees. Yeah, and I can take some questions, and I don't know if Chris Heredia, if you want to chime in and correct maybe anything I may have said or incorrectly, or yeah.
No, Susan, that was a brilliant presentation. Thank you very much for your thoroughness and your intellect and your passion for trees in San Francisco. I've learned so much from you these past few years working with Buff, and you make my job easier, and I'm really grateful for your leadership stepping in. I don't have any corrections. I did clarify Josh's question on the 4,000 number. That includes both FUF and Buff plantings, as well as watering. So when you look at our annual planting, I think FUF is doing closer to 1,500 a year, and we are doing around 1,700 a year.
Right. It's more that we're watering like 4,000. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I misspoke.
That's our.
Yeah,
No,
we were
no,
watering 4,000.
That was in the slideshow, and he asked for clarification.
Yes, yes.
So
trees are watered for 3 years.
Yes, Josh, you had a question for me earlier, or another panelist did, about Carla, and I just want to say that we are so fortunate that Carla Short, a certified arborist, is the head of the Department of Public Works. Not only is she the first woman to hold that position in the city's history, but she holds tree preservation, maintenance, and growing the urban forest near and dear to her heart. Arbor Day coming up March 14th. We hope you'll join us in Chinatown, Fisherman's Wharf, at other neighborhoods to plant. We're going to plant 100 trees, and we'd love you to join us. We're so excited to have received this $12 million federal grant. Out of all the applicants in California, San Francisco received the largest award to plant 3,500 trees in low canopy neighborhoods. So you'll be seeing us out primarily in the Southeast, but we are hitting some parts of the Mission, as well as some smaller planting locations downtown. And so we're very, very excited, honored to have received that funding, because we don't have dedicated money for tree planting very, very much. So this is a huge shot in the arm for our greening effort, and will, catapult us closer to our 2040 goal to grow the urban forest by 30,000 trees. I want to thank each of you for your advocacy. We couldn't do this without you. You'd be surprised how many neighborhoods we go to and folks are like, we don't want a tree in front of our house. And so to meet groups such as yours who are so passionate about planting trees and stewarding the trees, keeping an eye on them, because Public Works can't be there 24/7. So we rely on you to let us know, hey, that watering bag went missing, or that someone, ran over that tree stake. And if we don't get to that tree quickly, it's not going to have a strong chance of surviving. So you're our eyes and ears, and we thank you for that. Did you have any other questions of Susan or myself?
Well, the first question is from Dave Osgood. And by the way, thank you for your presentation. And Dave will be the first question.
Hi, thank you. And I'd like to preface my remarks by thanking Susan for meeting with us to save 5 trees on Howard Street. As far as my question, in the form of a question, kind of getting to the main issue, Susan, aren't you concerned that many people see BUF as rather automatically approving tree removals, sort of approving the removal and looking into it later? We've had 38 tree removals approved just in the block around the complex where I live, and we know that they were not all legitimate. So that seems to be Buff's reputation. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, it's complicated polling a reputation, because in some parts of the city, you get the reputation of, oh, well, the tree people won't let you do anything. You can't do anything with a tree. Like, oh, don't even bother. And then in other parts of the city, especially in your area of the city where there's a lot of development, it's a lot harder to retain trees when you have massive amounts of infrastructure going in. So I can understand why that is the perception. Like, I do think it's definitely specific to where you are, and also like the type of work that's happening. And we don't want people to think that we make one decision or other, because we don't. We do review tree removals as they come in, and when we approve those trees in those heavily developed areas, it pains us. The flip side of those permits is, we're getting a lot of emails from those developers being like, how come you've sat on my permit for so long? Can't you just approve it now and I'll just replant the trees? And part of the length on their side is we're trying to analyze how many trees can they actually replace? What's the appraisal value of those trees? So I do want to work on that perception, because we do spend a lot of time and heartache going back and forth with some of these people and like, what can we actually approve? And then it's true on the other side of the city to be like, well, you guys don't approve anything. So I think you bring a good point, and like I can't deny what someone's perception is, right? So I think your feedback is noted, and we are going to work on that perception. But I will say that it's different depending on where you are.
George, you're next.
Thank you, Susan and Christopher. My question is pretty simple. It's about how competitive your agency is compared to private tree services. My neighborhood has been plagued by 80 years ago. They planted very heavy old Monterey pines in sand. So we constantly have tree problems. and people are always putting this out to bid, and you guys are almost always a third to almost a half more expensive to do anything with the trees. And I was curious why the disparity in cost.
I'd have to see what actual like numbers you're looking at because it depends. Like our internal contracts all go through regulatory affairs and contract administration, and they are reviewed for fair wages. So oftentimes a contract and the bottom line that the arborist is getting paid isn't necessarily the initial cost of the contract to the taxpayers, because there's also a bunch of administrative costs to issuing those contracts, and B, those companies are making a profit, so they may be showing you what the labor cost is, but they're not necessarily showing you what their profit is. And C, like we only have really like 12 arborists across the city, so we are actually contracting a huge number of trees out. Our arborists do very specific, highly specialized work. They have about 50 years of experience across some of the super, actually, they probably have like 70 years of experience across the supervisors alone, the arborist supervisors. So we send them out on really complicated jobs, and they're also spending a lot more time maintaining a tree for specific objectives. So it's kind of like routine pruning might go to a contractor and it's a little easier work, but we give the very complicated and special jobs to our internal arborists because they're just really good. We want them to handle things with care. So we had like a palm tree on Castro Street, and it had a disease called fusarium wilt, and that's highly, highly contagious. And so if we had just contracted that out, it wasn't clear if that contractor understood the best management practices for reducing the contagion of fusarium. But our internal arborist did, and so it did take a lot of extra time and resources to wrap the tree and contain the disease to prevent it from spreading. So they may cost more, assuming that those numbers are um, we could vet those numbers, but they are often doing very specialized work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Barbara, you're the next question.
Hi, thanks, Susan. I think you and I have talked on the phone over the years about trees. There was a situation, I'm going to give an example, and maybe you can give me an observation as to why the result was different from what we were told. There were, I believe, 5 trees at the corner of Scott and Green on the southeast corner. They were diseased, they were dangerous, tall, lanky. And I attended a meeting with your group, with the neighbors around deciding about the trees, and we were told that, yes, they would take them all out. They could not replant and replace 5 new trees because of a fire hydrant and a street post. But we were told that they would put in 3 trees. They'd have to create new beds that were bigger, that this was one of the issues. And they said they would do it all together. They'd come in and take the trees out, they'd do the preparation, and they'd plant the new trees. So we waited. And then they came and they took the trees out. They didn't create new beds. They didn't plant any new trees. So we lost 5 trees at that corner. And we have beautiful new sidewalks and no tree planting. And I'm wondering why I could talk with you offline about this, why that decision was made. I don't know if you remember, but it was just a switch.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like we make a decision to not complete like half of the requirement for that for a site. But I would chalk it up to mostly the difference in the shops and their bandwidth. So like we have an arborist shop that removes trees, and then to redo all the concrete is a very different shop and amount of labor. But I think we can look into that specific site for you because I think I know
Yeah.
which one you're talking about, and I know the inspector um had like all the best intentions of like assuming all those things would happen at the same time. But it does require an enhanced level of coordination to make all the shops work together.
Mhm.
Because they all have, we all have competing priorities, right? Arborists,
Yeah.
arborists are out there trying to pick up trees falling down from storms. Cement masons are out there just trying to make sure people aren't tripping on sidewalks. So combining the two jobs is an enhanced level of coordination, and I'd be happy to look into that one for you.
Would you? Because I
Yeah.
mean, they're not going to put new trees in. The trees are gone and they're not going to be put in
Yeah.
new.
And I think I know
So
which one
we,
you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah,
they're like diseased. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Is John Crabtree?
Hi, Susan. So first of all, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but relative to the Bureau of Urban Forestry's reaction to the mayor's and Supervisor Wong's, I don't know, tree initiative. Somebody had the number earlier. I don't have it memorized. Um, the tree initiative, for lack of a better word phrase, is that you seem less than full-throated in support of it. You offered more about how you could work with it. And I understand that. I'm not challenging that, but if the department or you are fully in support of this, maybe correct me if I'm wrong about that, because that's my take. However, my main concern with this policy is that it doubles down on advantage for developers. I would argue, actually, I am arguing that if the city is going to diminish or eliminate the right of appeal, removal of street trees, then in combination, the use of in lieu fees should be foregone too. And stick with me here. So if someone decides to take out my favorite tree, right, and now I've lost the ability to appeal that. And in the same action, in the same piece of policy, I am not able to, or the city is not able to require the developer to replace that tree, but rather give them an out there too, which, I mean, let's be honest, even as you described it, even if everyone is earnest in their use of in lieu fees, it still doesn't provide anywhere near a guarantee to me that that tree that got removed that I was not able to appeal is now, somewhat likely to never be replaced. The combination of allowing developers to use in lieu fees and the removal of the appeal process or the right of appeal for the citizens, they act in tandem, right? They make it more difficult for me to require that the tree be replaced. So that's what I'm asking you. I mean, first of all, are you supportive? Are you guys on the fence? Or are you just not commenting? And also, I'm deeply troubled by the connection of the loss of appeal and the use of in lieu fees in tandem. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So it is actually an incompatible activity for a city employee to
Sure,
be for or against the legislation. So
sure.
we're required only to act as a subject matter expert. Um, so we try our best to provide the subject matter to the legislators as they ask, in the most factual way possible. But that's the limit of our powers when it comes to legislation. So we rely heavily on you all to drive legislation because the supervisors are listening to their constituents.
Well,
So
I appreciate that. On
yeah,
the second point, the subject matter
yeah.
expert,
So
could
the
I get a
second
subject
point,
matter expert comment on the combination of
yeah.
the removal of appeal and in lieu fees? Do you think
So
that,
the Board
how's
of
that going to work?
Appeals item is only addressing city initiated tree removals. So if a developer or a private entity seeks to remove a tree with a permit, that permit is still appealable. So that was never on the table. What would is or was on the table was the city initiated tree removals, and that's kind of like what Mr. Osgood dealt with was that was a city project, and it was a streetscape, and it's a Vision Zero enhancement streetscape. And so there's a lot of infrastructure going in. So yeah, that was targeting specifically city projects, and like one example is like Japantown Plaza. That's a city initiated project, and the idea was to not let those be appealable. And so tree removal permits were never on the table. So, and just because you can pay an in lieu fee when you trigger tree planting doesn't mean the removal section of the code doesn't apply. So the code has three sections, or multiple sections, but there's three pertinent sections. And in Article 16, Section 806, and there's planting and removal of street trees, and there's a own section for removal. So if someone desires to remove a tree, that section of the code requires that they replace it in kind, to an equivalent value tree. And then there's another section, Section D, that says if you are erecting a new building, then you have to plant one tree for every 20 feet.
Oh God,
So
yeah.
yeah, so they are separate. And
I don't know. I'm gonna just keep
if
it
you
on mute and
remove a
come in.
tree, you have to basically replace it, even if the in lieu fee situation applies. So you're not going to be exempt from replacing trees. You're just exempt from planting, if you're triggering like a new planting site.
Okay, Thomasita, you're next.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for having this forum. I'd like to, since it is a forum, call back Josh. First of all, I'd like to know where are we in the process of this proposal? Like, I know you have a petition. I signed it a month ago, but where does it go now? What's the timing? What can we all do? And I have some questions. First of all, in-kind replacement is a ridiculous misnomer because there's no replacing a tree that has been on a street for 60 years and is fully grown and home to myriad birds and perhaps other wildlife, and putting in a skinny tree that is, looks like it comes from, the Home Depot garden center and won't be fully alive for another, won't be rich and flowering for at least 20 years. So that's not even in kind replacement. But for example, right now, my understanding is that what's being proposed by the city is to defeat what the hard-fought gains of the Mission Verde folks that were able to save so many trees. And now the city wants to remove some of the trees that were saved. And Hummingbird Farm, which is a project of Poder, and which is city, I guess it's owned by the city, or PUC, but it's a community-run farm that is introducing urban kids to farming, to urban farming, and which has many trees that the city now wants to chop down, and they also want to replace the grass around there with plastic toxic turf. And where do people go if they can't go to the appeal? So I want to know, to me, this is a travesty, it's an outrage, and it just is taking away the power from the people. And who is it putting it in the hands of? Once again, the city that doesn't pay attention to us, the bureaucracy that always ignores what the people want. Like we fought for the natural grass behind the beach chalet, and we were overridden. And now, even the professional football players say that their injuries are greatly increased when they're playing on artificial turf instead of natural grass. So it's a widely known fact across the country that this toxic turf is causing cancer all around the country, and yet the Department of Public Works is insisting on replacing the natural grass in our city parks with this stuff that's made with recycled tires. So where do we go? And once again, my question is, where is it now? And what really can be done besides a petition? And like someone said in the chat, the supervisors don't even listen to us, but who's got the power to make the decision, and what are the steps we need to take right away, and where do we go for more information as this goes along? Thank you.
So just to break down two different things. So Mission Verde, Public Works, street trees. The right to appeal is not being eliminated. It's just being condensed to a 30-day approval window from the Board of Appeals. As far as we know, Josh Klipp was right that amendment hasn't been updated yet, and I would be concerned too. So I would press upon your supervisors about that. And also, like, they respond to volume. They need to hear from like 70 of you. Like they don't just, I will just say, like, I've been an advocate in other things, my personal life, and they respond to volume. I've had to get like a grassroots community. And there's enough of you on this call where like you want each and every single one of you to send a inquiry about it. It's volume is really important. So the right to appeal is no longer on the tape. The right to eliminating the right to appeal a city removal is no longer on the table. And then so the appeal amendment is no longer being eliminated. It's just being modified to reduce the amount of time. And part of the concern was that some of these appeals took about 9 months to resolve. And my understanding of the concern is that they were concerned that some of the costs were escalating for some of these projects, for city projects. So that's just some information, but the legislative record has has been updated yet. This legislative attorneys still need to draft the amendment. And then the other thing is, I'm sorry, like I wish we had more control over Rec and Park, and various parks, and just in the sense that I wish we were a little more cohesive with our urban forest plan, but the city is very complicated and we have various jurisdictions, and I wish I could say like, oh, I'll look into the turf, but I really, that's Rec and Park, and I can't tell Rec and Park what to do. I can send a nudge and say, hey, like I heard about this, but Public Works and Rec and Park are two very different departments and jurisdictions.
Yeah, I'll just Tomasita, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, Hummingbird Farm, that's on Rec Park property, and as I mentioned in my presentation, there is no public process for that for trees on Rec Park. There's no permit required to remove trees in our parks. There's no public hearing. There's no appeals process. So Rec Park will frequently hold meetings, community meetings, or they'll put a piece of paper on a tree that says if you have a question about this tree being removed, and that basically goes to a PR person who works for Rec Park. In terms of the appeals and the appeals process in the proposed amendments, so as I mentioned, the mayor's office is indicating that they will remove the proposed amendment to get rid of appeals altogether, but keep the removal of appeals for hazard trees. And then also compressing the time. There's the average amount of time that the Board of Appeals takes to resolve an appeal is about 75 days. Now, if that appeal takes longer, that is only because both parties have agreed to that. So I can't file an appeal and then say I want this to last 3 or 4 months. It's going to go to a hearing when the Board of Appeals says it's going to go to hearing. If it extends longer, it's only because I have agreed to that and the city has agreed to that. So to the extent that it takes longer than the average amount of time before the Board of Appeals, that is by agreement. That's not anyone from the public forcing a longer period of time. And then in terms, Tomasita, of where this all stands currently in the legislative process, typically this is the kind of amendment that might go to planning, but I think somebody may know more about this than I do, but I think because there was a statement issued that this proposed amendment does not have any environmental impacts. It does not require a CEQA review. Sort of a strange thing to say about a tree law amendment, but that is what the city has said, is that this does not have an environmental impact. And so it would not go to the Planning Commission. The next place it would go is to the Land Use Transportation Committee. The Land Use Transportation Committee meets every Monday. They put out their agenda every Friday. So I recommend staying on top of that and seeing if it is on their agenda. Once the Land Use Transportation Committee reviews it and makes a recommendation, it would then go to the full Board of Supervisors for vote. The last opportunity to make public comment would be at the Land Use Transportation Committee. Once it goes to the Board of Supervisors, there's no opportunity for public comment. And so I would echo Susan's sort of sentiment that really the most effective mechanism here is public pressure.
Okay, George, you're next.
Thank you. This is in response to what John was saying. John, I am not a city employee, so I can pretty much say whatever I want. And I will tell you, I've worked with in lieu fees in all types of situations, and they are terrible. They give a developer the full right to cut down whatever they want to and simply pay for it. So sometimes it varies. If there's 5 trees, only 3 get cut down or whatever. But in lieu fees are a disaster for keeping an urban canopy and keeping it nice, because now somebody with money can just simply go in and do whatever they want. In my view, the city has pretty much sold out to developers and for housing, and part of that sellout is in lieu fees on trees.
Yeah.
You.
Okay, we have 3 more questions, and then we're going to go to our next speaker, Marie, Mary Eliza, and then Sean. And then we'll hear from Dave Osgood.
Mine will be quick. The city trees, wait a minute. I think we need to keep fighting this. Because the 30-day hazard trees can be anything they want. Because we know that we have a mayor that has a specific agenda, and so I don't trust them to use words against us. And I think we need to keep pushing. And that's all I'll say, because I know there's other speakers.
Okay. Mary Eliza?
Yes, Kyle seems to have some opinion on the record being different, and if that person wants to speak up and explain what he means by what the records show now, that would be helpful, because I think people do want to know what's going on currently with that bill that we've been told about. It sounds like there's some ability to have it amended still. And anyway, if Kyle wants to answer that question, that would be great. Thanks.
Oh, and before Kyle comes on, Sean, what is your question?
Yeah, I was just gonna make a couple of comments before we move on, and this can replace any presentation I give. I just want to share that, this legislation feels like a solution in search of a problem. A lot of what's being described here doesn't appear to be solving the many real issues that we have facing the urban forest. I'll echo some of what I heard from Josh, that, our urban forest is declining. And I judge a city not on how many trees it has or how many trees its employees are in charge of, but how it stewards that resource. And that resource is declining. And I think it's multifactorial on why. I think we have a lot of great civil servants, some of them on this call, that are doing good work. And the department seems totally overburdened with too much work and not enough budget. That being said, I'm a little concerned about giving them more budget. And so my name is Sean. I'm with fairtrees.org. If you haven't been to fairtrees.org, we're documenting the ways in which money gets used and how our urban canopy that does exist is distributed very inequitably because of a series of broken promises. And so 2 notes I'll just make. Many on this call may not be aware that Assemblymember Matt Haney just recently called for the Attorney General to investigate the city of San Francisco over its street tree program. And so if you haven't seen that letter, that's at fairtrees.org. And then second, just about 3 weeks ago, Supervisor Dorsey of District 6 opened a Board of Supervisor charter inquiry into public works stewardship of the urban forest and misdirecting discretionary funds. And so creating another fund that can be used in discretionary ways. I know we've said that it is for low canopy, and that is not in the legislation, as Josh points out. So a lot of city employees are saying that this is for low canopy neighborhoods. That is not written anywhere. It's just sort of a trust us. And so those are a couple comments on it. I'll be tracking this very closely. And as Josh says, at that committee hearing, whenever it gets scheduled, will really be the only opportunity that we all have to speak up. And so you should join Josh's petition. Our petition, which is different, is at fairtrees.org, and we'll also be keeping our petitioners updated for actions they can take to improve this legislation. Thanks for having me.
And Mary Eliza, one last comment before Dave's presentation.
Okay, sure. Let's see. Yes, I'm still on. I was kind of concerned, nobody's mentioned the problems that we have right now with erosion, where trees have been removed. And there's been no discussion, talk about effects of, nasty effects on the environment. We definitely need to bring that up and look at it and see where it's already a problem. I can show you some areas I'm very familiar with. All of these hills have water in them. A lot of them have water leaking in them. And then when you take the trees out, the trees actually suck up some of the water. It starts going downhill, and then the soil starts going downhill, and you have a real problem with flooding, particularly on the hills. I can indicate those later for anybody who's interested in knowing more about it, but I'd like to have some discussion on that if anybody would like to bring that up. Thanks.
Oh, and Dave Osgood, he's on the board of the Coalition for San Francisco Neighborhoods. He's part of the Rincon Neighbors Association, and he's an ardent supporter of trees, and he saved trees in his neighborhood. So take it away, Dave.
Well, I'm not going to give a presentation. I spoke earlier, but we did have some success with saving some city trees in the last month. But we lose most of them to the property owners whose requests, as I indicated earlier, seem to get rubber stamped. 38 of them just around this complex. And an example, we just lost 10 trees at Spear and Mission. And Buff approved that. It was the request from the property owner was all based on engineering issues, waterproofing and that sort of thing. But Buff approved it before any engineer's report was forthcoming. When we pointed that out, they went out and quickly cobbled together, got an engineer to write the weakest report you can imagine. But again, the point is they approved it before that. And none of these seem to be really necessary. It's just developers and building owners want to save a few bucks by clearing out all the trees and the sidewalk and planting some twigs. So I'm done.
Well, I want to thank all our panelists, and I want to urge everyone, sign both petitions that are in chat, John's petition and Josh's. Please contact your supervisors, contact all the boards of supervisors, get your friends, your family. Let them know we want our trees saved. We want an appeal process. If the bill's going to go through, there has to be significant amendments, but we've got to let our supervisors know, as Susan said, volume, volume, volume. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So does anyone have any questions? There's no more questions, then we will go to some issues for the General Assembly to take care of. And
Deborah, Susan and I are going to excuse ourselves. Thank you very much for inviting us to this meeting. We love your passion and holding the city to account on several issues. Without advocates like you bringing to attention these fine points that a lot of folks are not aware about, is very helpful for the process. And so while we can't advocate on behalf of this legislation or speak, we're the subject matter experts, as Susan was saying. We want you to be informed, and so that you can go to these meetings and speak with your elected officials to tailor this in a way that is satisfactory to the communities and preserving, growing our urban forest. So just want to reiterate that we have a very low removal percentage in San Francisco. It's about 1.5% tree removals. And so we do remove trees as a last resort. We're in the game of greening San Francisco, and we want you to join us in that effort. So it might appear imbalanced in some situations, like Dave's neighborhood, but for all those trees that had to be removed, we'll be replanting in the neighborhood or adjacent neighborhoods. So thank you very much, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Well, thank you so much for coming and speaking. Good night.
Bye-bye.